near JCPenney's in the mall.
The Santa Clarita Artists Association has a new gallery in downtown Newhall on 6th Street between Main and Railroad, right across from the Canyon Theater Guild. The gallery features our members' paintings, sculptures, and one-of-a-kind handcrafted gift items. Whether you're an art lover, buyer, or an artist wishing to join, visit our website at santaclaritaartist.org, come to our free monthly meetings at Barnes & Noble, or stop by the gallery. For upcoming events and exhibits, check us out at santaclaritaartist.org. We make visual art visible.
Hey there, I'm Tori with your hometown station weather. Partly cloudy today, a high of 89. Clear overnight with a low of 63. More sun tomorrow with a high of 91. Don't miss out. Get your tickets to Diamond Rio at the Santa Clarita Performing Arts Center, College of the Canyons, Saturday, June 30th at 7 p.m. with special guest Savannah Burrows. Tickets are on sale now. Visit canyonspac.com. That's canyonspac.com.
Well, welcome, everybody. You're listening to Mike McGrath and Your Money Path with Mike McGrath. Welcome to the new installment of this show. For those of you not watching the World Cup, thank you for tuning in and listening and watching on Facebook Live here, as well as on KHTS 98.1 and AM 1220. So again, I'm your host, Mike McGrath, and just as a quick reminder, only the fourth show here in the installment. So whole idea of the show here with Your Money Path is to really take some interesting guests, ask some in-depth questions with the goal of drawing out some principles that we can all use as we all plan out our futures with various items, whether it's investing, insurances, and those kinds of things. So rather than getting into the weeds of all those different things, it's really to talk about life stories and how we can better use money and plan with money and use it to our benefit. So, and the premise is, after doing financial planning for 22 years now, I found that there are certain principles and certain attributes that make people successful when it comes to personal finances. And it's not really having to do with which stock they picked as much as it is things like their perseverance through adversity, through their patience, through just investing with intention and purpose, and things that are most important to them. So the hope is to draw those principles out of real stories and real people and make us all better investors, because we want to make sure that if we do those things, we can make better families, better marriages, better communities, and so on. So today, I wanted to kind of recap a couple things because I think it'd be a good segue into our guest, Alex Galletly. Before I bring in Alex, though, as he's patiently waiting, so far the idea of the show has brought in my first guest, which was my father, an 81-year-old who has gone through a lot of life, financially and otherwise. We have talked to people from different occupations. We've talked to authors. We've talked to community activists. We've talked to business owners and some of the things that they have learned. One of the items that comes up a lot with myself and my colleagues at EP Wealth Advisors is the idea of how to best communicate issues of wealth, especially to this next generation, commonly known as millennials. They get derided and overgeneralized and stereotyped, right? So
absolutely.
So I wanted to kind of unpack that, just kind of cut through that, and the idea of how do we best train and teach and model good financial stewardship to that next generation. Now, I'm a father of millennials, so this kind of hits home. But some of the things that come to in mind, though, if I could set the stage a little bit, is that millennials have a unique background when it comes to finances. So this is a generation of folks, and again, I'm kind of painting this with a little bit of a broad brush, so forgive me ahead of time, but this generation growing up has seen two major recessions, including the Great Recession of 2007 and 9, which was the worst in our country's history, save for the Great Depression, but strong enough to have an impact on mindsets, right, generally speaking. This is also a group of folks who have seen the cost of college education, which was already growing pretty quickly, just get blown out of proportion. And as a result, wanting to be educated, and by the way, millennials are one of the most educated generations in our history. But that said, there's a way to pay for that, and that's through college debt. So that's been a huge, huge issue. The Economist had quoted that as of the end of last year, there's 1.5 trillion, that's with a T, dollars of student debt that's out there. Most of which, not all of which, but most of which is with millennials. 44 million borrowers make up that amount, with an average of over $37,000 per person. And I know personally stories of people with $100,000, $120,000. Hard to deal with when your degree was English, right? So it's an issue. Job availability, until recently, has been an issue. Once you've graduated from college with this great degree, although it has gotten better, millennials account for, according to U.S. Census data, 40% of the unemployed. Some of that's natural because of age, but it's an issue. So there's a lot of sort of issues that are kind of there, and as a result, not surprisingly, the number one issue commonly in surveys among millennials is anxiety, particularly around financial matters. And in all seriousness, the suicide rate among millennials is up 27% over the last 15 years. So there's some serious issues here. So we're going to intersect a part of that. Obviously, that's a massive issue to deal with. But the sort of good news, I guess, for potentially, is that there is $30 trillion, again with a T, $30 trillion, give or take, of money to be inherited in the next decade or so, starting with the baby boomers, but even in my generation, the Gen Xers. And so the question is, does that really help? And I think to dive into that issue, does it really help, is an issue of how do we talk about this? So if I can go back a couple generations, that the greatest generation to start with, but even the baby boomers, money's not something you talk about. It's taboo. So my financial situation is private, if you need to know, right? And the result has been, not great, right? There's a lot of people who don't know as much as they should about finances in general. They don't know as much as they should about their own situation, whether it be money inherited or a spouse who loses the other spouse who handled the money. So there's all kinds of issues. So hoping that we can transition this into something a little bit healthier as we project down to this next generation, the millennials. So that's our topic today, and hopefully, again, that we can pull out some principles that we can all use, whether you're a millennial listening to this or a parent of a millennial, or you have nothing to do with millennials ever in your life. So I wanted to transition this to Alex. So Alex Galletly is an intern with EP Wealth Advisors this summer. And I'm going to let Alex tell most of his story because I'll probably mess it up. But Alex has become one of the go-to folks in our main office, which is in Torrance, California. And again, EP Wealth is a fee-only fiduciary firm. So Alex wanted to get an experience with that kind of situation. And so it's been working out great. But Alex also has a personal story that kind of coincides with his practical and academic education in finance. I want to bring him into. And then how you guys have talked about money in your family, lessons that we can learn from your family, and I'll throw in a couple tidbits along the way just from my own experience. So Alex Galletly, I think maybe we could start, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit about your story. And then I have some questions for you to maybe kind of draw some things out. So,
thanks for having me on, Mike. I believe, like going back to what you were saying, financial literacy is something that needs to be taught to everyone. I believe the more transparent you are, whether it be between your parents and yourself as a child, I think that's very important. I grew up in Danville, California, a affluent suburb, I would like to call it, outside of Walnut Creek area,
right,
near Berkeley. Lots of wealthy and successful families, a lot of them well planned for their future, a lot of them not so much. I was taught to save from my parents. They were both financially conservative, to say the least.
Okay.
I was taught to save young, to prepare for my future in very vague terms. I didn't know what this meant, when I was 12 years old.
You mean like what the future really actually meant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like what am I, I had this idea in my head of college, that must cost something, but all the other things in life, I had no idea what I was preparing for. I was saving money I got from birthdays and Christmas, and when you're a kid, you don't have many expenses when your parents are supporting you
Right.
and raising you, right? Until you're about 16 and you're a teenager and you can kind of go out on your own if you have a car and aspirations. You don't have expenses really. So both my parents were very hard workers. They did everything in their power to provide for me and my brother Nick as a family of 4.
Okay.
And they were very afraid of debt, I think. I haven't confirmed that with them personally, but I had this idea that they were afraid of debt. Like, debt is the devil. And I confirmed this by saving my money. And we had this idea in our family, which I still think is a great thing to practice, is you never want to be, how do I say this? It would have been better to attend a college, for example, that was a significantly less amount of money,
Right.
rather than the typical choices of colleges for kids in my area. I remember getting accepted to Boulder, Colorado, and not knowing much about tuition costs. That was where I was set to go until I opened my eyes and talked with my parents about, what the real value in education is. And that shifted my focus to schools that cost less, where I could get the exact same education and fulfillment.
So was the idea in that, though, because I'm getting two things potentially. Like when I've heard others talk about the idea of, well, save, just because. Sometimes that's out of, I don't know if the word is fear per se, but out of concern at least, that there's not enough and there won't be enough. And that might be a part of it. But there's also a healthier view, which is when you look at college, what's the best value? Right. So you can go to George Washington University. Last time I checked, was the most expensive school. And I can't remember the exact amount, give or take $70,000 a year, $80,000 a year.
NYU's up there.
Yeah, NYU's up there. Of course, there's some local schools here, Stanford, SC. They're not inexpensive. So the question is, if I'm going to go study, world history, and that's my degree, and I'm going to go all debt. True story. It was a colleague's daughter-in-law, so I'm kind of removed from the person, but they got an English degree from a private school that cost about $45,000 a year. It was almost all debt. And so they came out. That was one of the stories, $120,000 of debt, and they have a degree in English. Obviously bright. They went through school. They're well-read. But the question is, how do I translate that into enough income to pay the payment, right? So there's a question of value. So that's healthy, I would think, right? So maybe I don't go to this expensive school. I have a good school that may cost me less, or where I got a scholarship or something. That might be best. So it sounds like there was kind of a message, a couple of messages there just growing up, almost by default. And in defense of your parents, if I could say, as a parent, I think a lot of the messages we give sometimes are by default, right? So we're not sure how. And that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to do this, is because I think as parents sometimes, or even older to younger siblings, how do we communicate things? How do we talk about this? So and we'll get to that in a minute, like how. But so you transitioned into college with the logic of what's the best value. So where did you end up then? Where did you go?
I'm still attending University of Nevada, Reno.
Okay.
Not too far from home, but far enough to where I could forget about it. Didn't have the best.
That's for another episode. We won't go there.
Right. That's, yeah. And so that's where I'm attending, and I thought it was a perfect mix of fun, outdoor, leisurely activities to do up there, but most importantly, academic value.
Yeah.
To support what my family's beliefs were, we were always fans of mitigating risk, right? Like I was talking about before. And, it posed as a risk potentially to shoot for the moon and, just example, attend Northwestern University for 4 years for that much money, because there's always the chance that you may not end up liking the school or not be academically successful
Right.
as you might have thought. So that was just a big risk to me, putting all that money on the table for an education that you could get at most other universities. I always like to set my expectations kind of lower than I think most people. So to translate that, if you tell your girlfriend you'll be home in an hour and you get home in an hour and a half, doghouse. But if you tell her that you're going to get home in an hour and you come home in 30 minutes, you're a hero.
Right.
So to apply that to what you were talking about, I wanted to set my expectations not to the moon and just attend a university that I was comfortable going to, and that if things didn't work out and I wanted to transfer to a trade school, which I was very interested in, I still am, if things didn't work out, it wouldn't be the end of the world, and I could just kind of shift my path and not have to be so defined and focused on this. Okay, well, I have to graduate from Northwestern so I can get this job, and I just didn't want to. I wanted to mitigate all the risk I could.
Yeah, I understand. So the idea of value then is not just defined financially, but it's defined as what am I interested in, what are the career paths that I like, how much do those things cost at varying schools, what's the difference between the level of education, right?
Right.
I mean, there is a difference between a Northwestern and no shot at anybody who went here, but a Northwestern to say a Cal State Fullerton. Northwestern will draw some of the highest achieving economists, for example, in the world. So, but if that's your path, then maybe you try to make a way to make that fit.
Right.
If you want to do something different, then maybe that's not even necessary. So you kind of bring in a lot of things together. But let me ask you to kind of broaden this up a little bit, and going back into your younger years as well, and kind of bring us back to current. Outside of specifically college, as you guys talk about as a family growing up, about material things in general, or money in general, how do you use money? What is the value of money? How was that communicated? Was that talked about? How did you guys go about doing that as a family?
Discussions about money were definitely not popular, I would say, in plenty of parents today. We never formally sat down and talked about, how to use money as a tool and the use of it. I picked up on body language and things that my parents would say regarding friends and family, these little things that I would pick up on and start to put the puzzle together of, okay, what is the value of money?
So it's more something you watched than it was something you listened to, if you will.
Right, which I think probably many millennials did the same thing as I did. Just examples, parents would say, oh, did you hear the Smiths are selling their vacation home? And the body language from that, I'd kind of pick up, okay, maybe this is kind of seen as a bad thing. Like maybe this
I'm
is...
guessing this might have been 2008 or 9.
Yeah, good guess. I think it might have been. But, and you pick up on these little things and you start to equate, okay, money can be used for certain things.
Yeah.
And, my very basic things my parents taught me, I remember my mother teaching me how to deposit a check into my first Wells Fargo savings account when I was about 12, and how to take money out. And I remember her telling me that, if you hold your money in your savings account, it'll grow. Like the yields you get, which I later came to realize was only 0.06%. So,
right. Well, in her lifetime, it was probably more, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
after all the mess, I understand that.
And I took a personal management merit badge in Boy Scouts. So,
Nice.
I had some basic knowledge, save.
But it wasn't typically the conversation subject at say, dinner.
No.
Right, we're not talking about this.
No, definitely not dinner. Definitely something that I would but discuss with my parents privately. I would come to them with questions, from stuff I had heard in the media or school, about money, and I would clarify things, like what is a pension and things like this,
Sure.
and it was very bewildering, and there were a lot of things that I obviously didn't know. So
Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so I'm going to stop there because I want to pick up another angle on this, because there's the conversation about money in terms of knowledge, and then there's the idea, which you observed, which is more about wisdom, like what we do with the knowledge, right? So I'm going to pick up on that in a minute, but we want to take a quick break and sort of pay the bills, if you will. Again, you're listening to Mike McGrath and your Money Path with Mike McGrath, KHTS 98.1 and AM 1220. Be back in a minute.
Life's not meant to feel complacent. It's meant to make you feel alive. The youth ministry at the Church on the Way Santa Clarita believes that students can belong to the group where we will help them believe they have a purpose in Christ and become all that He has created them to be. We want to see God's power come alive in our generation. We love meeting new people, so come hang out with us. Doors open at 6 p.m. and service starts at 7 every Wednesday night. For more information about the Church on the Way Santa Clarita, including service times and what's happening through the end of the year, visit tcotwsc.org.
There's only one way to celebrate, and that is big. Coca-Cola presents July 4th Fest at Six Flags, June 30th through July 4th. Save big with any can of Coke and get exclusive early ride times every morning. See fireworks every night. Enjoy the new All-American Food Festival, plus an exclusive after party. Coca-Cola July 4th Fest at Six Flags, June 30th through July 4th. The most thrilling celebration in L.A.
This is a Rita's Daybreak. There's a huge crowd at Rita's. With so many amazing flavors, every day's a treat. Let's see what folks are celebrating.
I lost my first tooth.
No more training wheels.
My dog photo got 37 likes.
3 kids, 3 activities, 0 meltdowns. There you have it. Layer it, blend it, or drink it with Italian ice and creamy custard. So many reasons to celebrate at Rita's. This has been a Rita's Daybreak.
Men, are you feeling tired, stressed, or just don't have the energy you used to? Did you know this could be related to decreased testosterone levels? Luckily, there's a safe, effective solution. Weeder Prime helps support healthy testosterone levels with clinically tested key ingredients. Just 2 capsules of Weeder Prime each day can help change your mood, energy, focus, body fat, and lean muscle. Feel the way you felt 10, 20, even 30 years ago. Rediscover your Prime with Weeder Prime. To find a retailer near you, visit WeederPrime.com. That's WEIDER Prime.com.
Your hometown station, KHTS.
Well, welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Mike McGrath and your Financial Path with Mike McGrath on KHTS 98.1 and AM 1220. We're also streaming live at www.hometownstation.com. So, again, thanks for joining us. I'm here with Alex Galletly. And if you're just coming into the show, Alex is an intern with me and our firm, EP Wealth Advisors, a student at University of Nevada, Reno, and we have just loved having him. I thought the reason for having Alex here is because, generationally speaking, the idea and the conversations around money, and again, the show's idea is to pull the best principles that we can about how to properly handle and manage our money so that we're better people and have a better community. I thought that would make sense from a generational point of view. And as a parent of millennials, oftentimes you're not really sure. There's a lot of parents out there listening to this or who may pick up on this later. You just don't really know exactly how to go about that conversation. You kind of feel like you're trying to figure it out still. So what am I going to teach? That sort of thing. But there is a need for it, right? So we don't get generally a lot of public education. Doesn't include a lot of money management kind of things. You were just talking, Alex, about family teaching you how to deposit checks and write checks. I laughed when you said that because I don't think my kids have ever written a check. I mean, it's everything's online. You do it with your phone. They deposit checks with an app. I mean, when I was growing up, the concept of that wasn't even in our mindset. So there's huge differences, and that's no big deal, but it is different. And so we left the last right before we cut to break. this idea of gaining knowledge. So if you happen to take an elective at a local high school here, Hart High School, Saugus High School, there are some courses on basic economics, of course. My daughter, who's locally here at the Masters University for her general education, had to take a class in economics. And it's general information. It's good to know kind of a thing. My guess is that most kids kind of gloss through it and it's over.
Absolutely.
Unless you're interested, right? Sort of like me in biology. Was not interested, so I just squeaked through. But the idea, though, is that that's knowledge, right? So as a parent coming to an adult child, you couldn't impart knowledge, how to deposit a check, or this is how you apply for a credit card, or whatever that might be. But there's a big difference between teaching kind of that information and downloading it, if you will, to actually knowing what to do with the information. So my oldest son, who's almost 24, had a little bit extra money, and I mean a little bit, and he says, well, hey, I should probably save this. So how do I invest? And it was an interesting thing for me. I teach people how to invest for a living, but talking to him, thinking, what does he know? How do I frame this? You know, he doesn't have a lot of background, and so it was actually an interesting challenge. So ended up getting a little IRA and a little spider, you know, and he was great. So day two, that market happened to go up the day after. And he came back to me shocked. He said, wait a minute, I put in X dollars, and now I have this. I didn't even put any more money in. I'm like, yes, that's what investing is. However, next day the market got tanked, and so he comes back and says, well, what happened? Exactly. That's what the market does, right? So, but it was a learning lesson. But it was this idea of how do you go about it? What is the process? What's the mindset? How do you use this well? So you've had now some conversations proactively, right, with your family. So we talked about how you, Alex, how you grew up with this idea that how money was taught or communicated was a little bit more about what you observed in life and your family. You even mentioned the word body language at one point.
Yeah.
As opposed to something discussed in an organized, proactive, intentional way. And again, in defense of your family, that's pretty much 99.999% of us. But now you've had more proactive conversations about what it is to have it, how do you use it, how do you give it away if we're going to have a charitable mindset, those kinds of things. How do you handle debt? You talked a lot about the mindset growing up was debt equals bad, simple, black, white, done, right? And there's all kinds of folks out there that, you know, the Susie Ormans of the world, I mean, they talk about that kind of thing as well. So as you've had the conversation, what are some of the things that maybe that you've learned? And if you were sitting here with, let's reverse this. Let's say, imagine behind me there's a panel of parents, your parents, you know, colleagues, if you will, and compatriots. What are some of the things on how you would say, hey, this is how, knowing what I know now, if I'm going to coach you, how would you go about that? How would you coach them?
I think some of the things that I would teach to parents to ultimately teach their children is the importance of protecting your money. Money is an asset. You earned it. I think there's so much, what is the word? Lots of ways to spend money hastily. There are so many businesses and marketing schemes and e-commerce. These are just examples.
Sure.
But way to just lose your money. Lose your money by spending. I think that protecting what you have already is easier than trying to gain something that you don't have. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think teaching about opportunity costs is very important as well.
How do you mean?
Teaching opportunity cost, as as hey, Johnny, you just got $30. How are you going to spend that? Are you going to spend it on Slurpees and candy, or are you going to buy that new pair of shoes that you really need? And teaching the value of that.
Okay.
And teaching the value of buying assets instead of things that will disappear in a month. I like to use the example of buying food, takeout. You buy it and then it's gone a week later, where proactively you could use money to buy something that might provide value to you in the future,
Right.
whether it's securities or something that can develop your human capital, like school, things like that. Those are some of the things that I would teach.
Kind of teaching the balance maybe between the immediate and the future in a sense, right? Sometimes the immediate might be better. If I'm going to spend money on an advanced degree, maybe that's a good investment for the future, but I got to spend it now. And sometimes take the vacation and just blow it because you need to take a break. There's a balance there between that and which I hear a lot of times written out there with financial writers and whatnot is, it's always about, pay off the mortgage now, pay off the mortgage now, pay off because nothing else matters. Or you could save, 37 cents on your Verizon bill and put it in an IRA. It's all about investing, And those are generally good, again, good information, good principles, but there's got to be a balance, and hence the wisdom. Did you talk much with your family about we always call it legacy and all these fancy words, but how money gets passed and if you have charitable interests? Because one thing I've talked about, and the funny story, and I'll be brief for time's sake, but I was asked by a client of mine to do a talk to what I thought was some sixth graders at his son and daughter's school. So I show up, and it's not sixth graders, it's 6 sessions, first through sixth grade. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to communicate financial principles in 10 minutes to a first grader? Right. So it was fun. So what we did, and there's books that are based on this too. I didn't come up with this idea, but I literally had 3 jars that I brought from home. One was spending, one was saving, one was giving. Okay. And I started filling them up, with sand. And I said, well, how much? So I started asking questions. And the questions I changed based on the age, but it was this idea that I think you could be my dad's age in his 80s, or you could be my youngest son who just turned 7, and anywhere in between. The principle's the same. If I spend it, I can't save it. If I spend it or save it, I can't give it. So what are the values that are important to me up front? And then I can kind of do the math, if you will, of how much I want to give, how much I want to keep for longer term, like what you're talking about, how much I want to spend today on what I need, or just to have a good time, that there is something about living today, right? So have you guys talked about that as a family or even amongst colleagues and other students and things about those kinds of principles? Like, how do I give money? We've talked about millennials generally, I don't have a hard stat on this, but are a very giving group. There's a lot to do with giving to various organizations from, kids in Africa who can't get water, right, because they have to walk miles to go to the well, and all of that to domestic things. But has that been part of the dialogue?
Somewhat.
Okay.
I would say briefly. My family's always been big on philanthropy.
Okay.
That's for sure. But in terms of knowing how this money is kind of trickled down, honestly, no.
Okay.
Not at all. I had no idea what estates were or how money was passed on to generations. Obviously, I wanted to make an impression on my family name, keep the family in good name, and translating that to being successful, having money, I guess, doing what I like to do. But in terms of the topics of generational wealth and giving, that was also a very, very silent topic in our family.
Again, probably like most of us. Like my growing up, before you, obviously, same thing. Like I've read books and books and books about this, and it's pretty much literally almost 100% of people, right?
Right.
You know that your parents give, but you're not connected to it. You're not part of that because that's something in their mindset. Well, that's what we do, which isn't wrong. My parents are the same way, and that's so I'm asking almost for myself because in my head I'm thinking, how do I then coach families to now that not every family is as philanthropic as the next. So I'm not saying you have to do more or less. It's not about that, but it's just a part of that broader conversation. How is that communicated, and more importantly, what values do we want to pass down? Is there a financial tag to that? I don't know, but
I think that's something that they want me to learn to develop on my own, maybe.
Yeah, which is fair.
Right. I think, a lot of families out there are very traditional and like to keep their traditions in check and like to, I'm just thinking of an example of philanthropy that that parents have been involved with for many years. They might want their child to be involved in that same philanthropy, passing it down to the child literally. I think my parents are big on developing skills on your own.
Right,
so
just learning by doing.
Right. I think I need to find the need to be philanthropic on my own. Something's going to need to happen where I'm deciding to focus more on this. You know, you kind of deal with these things when you get there. In whether it's family members passing away and realizing how you want to translate their traditions to your life or their money to your life and others. I think it's something that you're presented with the idea. And you develop ways yourself on how you can best handle the situation and how you can make an impact yourself and on the community. From your own willpower.
And that's good too. I think, there's my wife and I always joke, we go back to say when my oldest was learning to ride a bike and she wanted to make sure he wouldn't fall. And I said, no. It's a dad thing, right? Let him fall.
Right.
Because he fell and he cut his knee and it was no big deal. And he got up and he kind of, that wasn't that big of a deal. And immediately the fear was gone and he just started riding his bike.
Right.
I think the idea being not really a dad-mom thing as much as it is sometimes you just got to learn. One of the books I read, which I'd recommend to anybody listening and recommend to you, is called Beating the Midas Curse. I'm going to forget the author, but if you Google it or go to Amazon, you'll find it. One of the stories they share, that Midas Curse being, the story of Midas, everything he touched was gold until he touched the thing he loved the most, which was his daughter, so she turns to gold, right? So there's a blessing and curse of that, right? And so the idea was that within 3 generations, generally, any wealth built by that first generation is gone. So how do we beat that? And the idea was passing down values was really what you're talking about. And some of that had to do with allowing the next generation or 2 generations to go mess it up. Because then they'll go, oh, now I get it.
Right.
Like I couldn't communicate this to you until you did it. And then you're like, you fell off the bike, if you will. And then you got up like, oh, now I get it. So then you learn from it. So that's one thing. In fact, an idea that might come up that I got from that book, but that might be something for yourself and anyone listening, was you develop as a family a certain amount of money. It doesn't have to be a lot. You don't have to be Bill Gates here. It could be $100. It could be $1,000, whatever, that you want to give to charity. And you bring in adult children probably. My 7-year-old may not get this quite yet, and you say, okay, you guys, the kids, then you guys decide who we give this to. And I want you to research the organization. You tell me, for example, how much of this goes to the cause versus, overhead and those kinds of things. With the sort of expectation they'll probably mess it up, but so you're going to give the money anyway. But then they learn. And what came out of this book, they did this exercise. There's adult children. This one particular case was a family. It was like Bill Gates. It was a huge amount of money, but the adult children had zero interest in this. Didn't care. They knew they had what they needed. So it was really kind of a selfish attitude. But they got really involved in this project because they had sort of pet ideas. Yeah. The daughter, I think, if I recall, was really in environmental causes. So, and it got all messed up. So they found out that they didn't go where they thought. They didn't do what they thought they were going to do with the money and this sort of thing. But they learned from it. And fast forward several years, they're super activists. They're, like you were saying, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into the cause, and the money was just sort of, oh yeah, and I can help you fund that, as opposed to this totally disinterested thing. So that might be something of consideration for you, for me. I'm trying this with my kids this year, so I'll come back next year and see if this worked. But again, I'm not Bill Gates either, but that's kind of the idea. Now we've talked about in past shows some of these principles. So I think if I were to go back to the very first show a few months ago, rather, talking to my dad, and I think the issue that came out of that was that you invest in what's important. And I'm going to ask you that question in a minute, so hold that thought. It's the idea of intentionality, the idea of purpose. So if I've been just investing because I'm afraid it's going to run out, I'm probably going to run out of interest or motivation at some point. But if I'm investing because I really want to get the college education or whatever that thing is, you tend to be able to stick it out. And related, we talked to Patty Handy, who also has a show here, for those of you who listen to KHTS, about starting over. And she talks in her life about persevering through a divorce and through setbacks and becoming very successful through that. And I wouldn't say in spite of it, almost because of it, just the growth that came out of that, the perseverance. And then we had Cameron Smythe, our former mayor here in Santa Clarita, talking about priorities. So here's someone who could have, and might eventually, but could have continued in a political career, but he kind of put it on hold, got the private job, and because he wanted to spend more time with his family. Big decision. But these are just life decisions that have financial implications, right? They're not necessarily financial decisions. So as we've studied that and we talk about what we've just talked about, what would you say the most important thing to invest in is, based on what you've learned in your experience to date?
I believe investing in people and time more than money, honestly. Investing my time with the people that I care about and the things that I love doing, I believe, are ultimately more important.
Like, give me an example. I mean, like kind of like an experience of some kind to enjoy with somebody, as opposed to buying, I don't know, I'm making this up, but like a car or something, that kind of thing, or help me understand.
A good example I have is when I was working at a hardware store,
Okay.
Ace Hardware, in my hometown. All my coworkers were, and I was investing in this investing my time to receive income, right? As a high school student, and the coworkers I was with were they were a little bit toxic. I thought they were my friends. I wasn't treated with a lot of respect. I felt like I was used a lot. I went through a lot of rough times with that job, and to coincide with what was going on in school, it was not healthy for me. I needed to be focusing on things that I liked more, like mountain biking and playing baseball. So all these dark days at this hardware store, right? It's such a funny idea, but I was kind of degrading myself. I was not happy with my attitude because of this, and my time was gone. My grades were starting to suffer, and so I said, this is enough. I don't need this. I don't. And so I quit the job. I accepted that I wouldn't be getting income. That was fine. And ultimately, I was so glad that I did it, because I had more time to participate in things that I love to do. I just brought that example up a second ago. I joined the high school mountain biking team, which is kind of a foreign idea for high schools now, right? And it was the greatest thing I ever did. I made tons of friends from that program. I pushed myself to set goals that I didn't think I would ever achieve. I was very physically fit, so that was nice.
Okay.
But I thought that was, in a nutshell, the perfect example of how you can take something that you may think is benefiting you, but then you kind of step back and look at it from, the greater scope and think, okay, this is not good.
Right.
My parents, I was hiding that from my parents. They weren't able to tell, right? So I thought that was a really good one.
So the idea then here would be to, I don't want to say invest by priority, because that's not necessarily a priority per se, but to spend your time, make your financial decisions with your personal health in mind and what you enjoy doing, what brings you the most satisfaction. We're going to cut to a break, but I think the best way to summarize that in my mind, I'm thinking of a book I've read. The author was Tim Maurer, M-A-U-R-E-R. I'm either forgetting the author, I'm going to forget the book name. I forgot the book, but I remember the author this time. But he had an idea there that, wealth management, right, what EP Wealth does, that wealth should equal, as he calls it, enough. And enough doesn't necessarily mean more. It might just be enough for what you want to do, what makes your life satisfying. So we'll build on that in just a second. We're going to pay some additional bills here. Mike McGrath with Your Money Path with Mike McGrath is KHTS 98.1 and AM 1220.
Lots of people can build websites, but there's one Santa Clarita company that specializes in designing websites for your business. Small Dog Creative. The Small Dog Creative team is made up of local designers who are hands-on. Their talented team of experts build premium websites and redefine branding. Small Dog Creative doesn't just build websites. They'll upgrade your business's online presence and turn your business into a powerful online brand. Small Dog Creative. Santa Clarita's most innovative web and design company. SmallDogCreative.com.
Men, are you feeling tired, stressed, or just don't have the energy you used to? Did you know this could be related to decreased testosterone levels? Luckily, there's a safe, effective solution. Weeder Prime helps support healthy testosterone levels with clinically tested key ingredients. Just 2 capsules of Weeder Prime each day can help change your mood, energy, focus, body fat, and lean muscle. Feel the way you felt 10, 20, even 30 years ago. Rediscover your Prime with Weeder Prime. To find a retailer near you, visit WeederPrime.com. That's WEIDER Prime.com.
Do you ever wonder, am I on the right path? Is my money working hard enough for me? I'm Mike McGrath, host of Your Money Path on the 4th Wednesday of every month at noon here on KHTS. I'm a certified financial planner and partner at EP Wealth Advisors, a fee-only wealth management firm here in Valencia. To find out how you can get on the right path, visit me, Mike McGrath, today at epwealth.com/Valencia.
The Santa Clarita Artists Association has a new gallery in downtown Newhall on 6th Street between Main and Railroad, right across from the Canyon Theater Guild. The gallery features our members' paintings, sculptures, and one-of-a-kind handcrafted gift items. Whether you're an art lover, buyer, or an artist wishing to join, visit our website at santaclaritaartist.org, come to our free monthly meetings at Barnes & Noble, or stop by the gallery. For upcoming events and exhibits, check us out at santaclaritaartist.org. We make visual art visible.
Hey there, I'm Tori with your hometown station weather. Partly cloudy today, a high of 89. Clear overnight with a low of 63. More sun tomorrow with a high of 91. Don't miss out. Get your tickets to Diamond Rio at the Santa Clarita Performing Arts Center, College of the Canyons, Saturday, June 30th at 7 p.m. with special guest Savannah Burrows. Tickets are on sale now. Visit canyonspac.com. That's canyonspac.com.
KHTS, your hometown station.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Again, you're listening to Mike McGrath, Your Money Path with Mike McGrath on KHTS, your hometown station, 98.1 and AM 1220. Again, I'm here with Alex Galletly, who is working with us here at EP Wealth Advisors. Again, EP Wealth Advisors is a fee-only fiduciary firm with offices throughout the western United States, including right here in Valencia, where I grew up and still live. You can reach me at mmcgrath@epwealth.com, or you just go to my special website, epwealth.com/Valencia. So, again, we're going to kind of wrap up the last few minutes with the show with some other, if you will, millennials. I hate to keep labeling you guys as if it's sort of something to get a wear on your forehead. But at EP Wealth, we do have some younger advisors, which Alex is growing up to be. And a couple of them shared with me some thoughts, and we put an article together about a month or so ago for Money Inc., 9 Financial Steps for Millennials, which I thought was just kind of taking some of this idea of knowledge. You can get some knowledge to try to put some wisdom to it. And the goal of that, and in part the goal here, in a microcosm, is to try to deal with some of these issues that we face, right? I don't think millennials are the only ones in the world who are anxious, right? So it's in the headlines now, right, with Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, and there's a lot of issues out there. Let's not be shy about it. But I think, and again, going to the theme of the whole and the point of this show, and what I want to be about in my practice at EP Wealth Advisors, is to try to remove some of that burden. And again, doesn't mean you have to have more, right? We talked about that right at the break, that wealth should equal enough, not more. But the idea of that, hey, I'm okay. And I can do, as you were just saying, to segue back to that, I can do what it is that makes me content and makes me happy, whether that's joining the mountain bike team or giving money to UNICEF or whatever that might be, and it's probably a lot of things, right? But some of the things we talked about, and you can look this up at moneyinc.com, or if you go to epwealth.com/Valencia, there's a link to that there, this article. But the idea of planning early, which we've talked about, which goes back to your parents' advice, right? You save and save, even if you're not even sure exactly what you're saving for. Just develop the habit, right? The discipline of that. Paying off credit cards, right? We all know the issues of their high interest. Sometimes it's necessary. When I was in school, I remember I was a commuter at one point. Transmission went, a couple grand, didn't have a couple grand.
Happened to me too.
Visa magically appeared and took care of it. Took me a heck of a long time to pay it back, though. So I understand that it's not a perfect science, but as a priority. And with that, develop a little bit of a cash cushion, some peace of mind. The big one, of course, is student loans. And go to the article if you don't mind, and we could look at some of the details of that. But the idea is consolidate and conquer. And then, of course, it goes on to tracking your credit score, making sure your insurance is covered. But the one I want to leave with is the idea of investing in what's important and expanding horizons. So we talked about, hey, there's a goal here of if I want to do what I really want to do for a living, I may need to get an MBA or a master's in psychology or something. My sister's a psychologist, had to do that. That's a good investment. There might actually be some debt in that. But if it's a good investment, it might be worthwhile. We'll pencil it out. That's where the knowledge comes from. But it's okay. So that's a good thing. So it does get down to situations that are real specific and real personal. So the idea that I want to leave with us is there's this idea that we've talked about perseverance. We've talked about investing with intention. And I think today maybe the theme that's come out of this is invest with your health in mind. And the idea of being enough, which doesn't necessarily mean more. So as I, again, reference that article, as you kind of conclude with us, Alex, would you say there's any kind of lasting thing that you would say, go back to that panel of parents, if you will, like one thing that you would want to give them that they could leave with us?
I think, like I was talking about earlier, the idea of opportunity cost might be the most important thing. I still struggle with this today, just teaching the importance of sacrifices and what are you willing to, in terms of money, purchase that's going to better you in the future as opposed to what you're thinking about right now. There's nothing better than doing something that you didn't want to do but feels good in the end.
Fair enough. Well, and I would say as we wrap this up today, anybody of you, especially parents out there, if you have questions about how to have this conversation and some tools and tips and books or just my experience with clients and with my own family, I'm an open book. So please give...
Live theater can be found right here in the Santa Clarita Valley. The Canyon Theater Guild has been entertaining audiences for decades with top quality musicals and plays.